Please be seated. What a special day to be together. So glad that you are here. Before I get started in today's message, though, I need to clear up a doctrinal error from last week's message. Let me say this to you. Jesus did not have a mother-in-law. How many of you did I completely confuse? I don't think Amy Walker's even back to church after that. I mean, it was just, I was trying to say Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law, but I twice said he healed his own mother-in-law. Jesus was not married. Everybody got that straight? How many of you can forgive me? Like Jeff, would you say, we will? Okay, thank you very much. All right. We continue on the sermon series, Follow Me, and trying to look at the depths of what that meant. And here's what I want you to see, what it clarifies, is Jesus is not looking for acceptance. Jesus is looking for apprentices. You see, so often we say, accept Jesus in your heart. That's sweet, that's good, that's right. But what Jesus really wants is you to accept the challenge to follow him and to be one of his apprentices. Now, today we're going to look at the first and most important discipleship truth. And here it is. To be like Jesus, you must be with Jesus. You cannot be like someone you don't know, and you cannot imitate someone that you haven't spent time with. And that's why at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, when he's calling his apostles, look at Mark 3, verse 14. Jesus appointed 12 that they might, say it with me, be with him. God, that's what's so important. That's what I love about our children's ministry and what we've done today. I was talking to Sharon and Hannah this week about the emphasis in our children's ministry. Here's what Miss Sharon says they emphasize in our preschool ministry. Jesus is your forever friend. What a great truth. In our elementary ministry right now on Wednesday nights, they're studying the Gospel of Matthew. And here's their point. Jesus wants you to love him more than anyone else. He wants to be with you. But let's be honest, as we talk about being with him, our big challenge is what I call distracted living. There are so many distractions. Guys, when it comes to really following Jesus, Satan doesn't have to get you into some kind of dark, awful sin. He might. All he's got to do is get your life so distracted by so many things that you don't focus on being with Jesus. How many of you watched the Netflix biographical film called Social Network? Anybody seen that? It's very, very challenging. It's about the founding of Facebook. And in one scene, they're showing Mark Zuckerberg in a disposition. And in that, they're asking him all these questions. And Zuckerberg, it's very clear he doesn't want to be there. He's looking out the window. He's got contempt for the whole problem. And finally, the other lawyer says, Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your attention? And he answered, you have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount of my attention. Wow. And my friends, if I could be honest with you, the problem with modern consumer Christianity is we call people Christians who give Jesus the minimum amount of their attention. So the problem is distractions. We all got them more than ever. Here's the good news. The good news is you have the ability to choose. You don't have to stay distracted. You know, Luke 10 is one of my favorite stories. Jesus comes to the home of Mary and Martha. The Bible says Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she comes complaining to Jesus and to Mary, who Mary's just shooting the breeze with Jesus in the den. And she comes in and she actually accuses Jesus. Don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work? And then Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by so many things. There's only one thing that matters, and Mary has, here's our key word, Mary has chosen it, and it will not be taken away from her. So the good news of this morning's message is if you are distracted, you can choose to become focused on Jesus. Here's a great passage, John 15, verse 5. I think that teaches us what he's asking us to do. Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Because apart from me, you can do nothing. The key word there, NIV uses the word remain. I really like the older translation. It's abide. It can be translated lots of ways. Remain, abide, stay, dwell. And in this section of John chapter 15, Jesus mentions that word abide at least 10 times. I like what one translation translates the last of that verse. Jesus is saying, make your home in me as I make my home in you. Jesus wants you to abide. Jesus wants you to live with him daily, hourly, by the minute. Now here's the good news. He's not asking you to do something you don't already do. The question is not whether you abide or not. The question is, where do you abide? What do you focus on? There's so many things. You may abide on your phone. You may abide in social networks. You may abide in your favorite news cable network, your favorite movies, your favorite hobby. You might abide and think more than anything else about your kids' sports. You might abide by constantly thinking about your job or relationships. But here's what Jesus says. Okay, you know how to abide. We all do it with something. Jesus says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to abide in me. I want to be with you 24/7. We're going to close this message in just a few minutes by singing that new song we've learned that says it better than I can say it. That song, Abide. And listen to the words. From my waking breath, for my daily bread, I depend on you. I depend on you. For the sun to rise, for my sleep at night, I depend on you. I depend on you. You're the way, the truth, and the life. You're the well that never runs dry. I'm the branch and you are the vine. Draw me close and teach me to abide. And I hope we'll do some of that this morning. Because here's what I'm challenging you to do this morning, is to choose closeness. And we can talk about that in two ways. What I call planned closeness and what I would call continual closeness. So what's planned closeness about? It's what we saw in Jesus last week in Mark 1:35. What does it say about Jesus? Very early in the morning, while it's still dark, Jesus got up, left his house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Planned closeness is that closeness I have when I plan that time. For many of it's first thing in the morning. For some of you, it's the last thing in the evening. Some of you might be in the middle of the day. But it's that time I say, I am dedicating to be with Jesus. And you remember our quotation, the most arrogant thing a man can do is to leave his home in the morning without praying. So that's good, but that's not what we're talking about today. What I want to talk to you about today is what I call continual closeness. There's not just this one time I'm with Jesus and then I leave him back there in my den. It's walking with Jesus all day long. Listen to what the psalmist said. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Oh, what a beautiful psalm. Paul puts it very succinctly. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17. He says, pray without ceasing. Now, does Paul mean you start a prayer and you never end it? No, that's not what he's saying. We know that's not even true in Paul's life. Well, then what's he saying? I'm in continual fellowship with God. I'm in continual talking terms with God. I didn't leave him back in the den in my quiet time. I'm walking and talking with him all day long. Now, the ancient saints had an incredible way of putting this, especially with our series here. Here's what they would say. Today, I would like to be covered in the dust of my rabbi. Isn't that cool? In other words, Jesus is my rabbi. I'm following him. I want to follow him so closely that the dust is all over me. Now, a term that began to be popular actually in the 16th century is this term. It simply is practicing the presence of Jesus. Say that with me. Practicing the presence of Jesus. Now, where did that come from? There was a man named Brother Lawrence who became a Christian late in his teen years. And so he joined a monastic community. Now, he wasn't a priest. He wasn't a monk. He joined as a dishwasher. His area of ministry was the kitchen. He spent his life, never got a promotion, spent his life in the kitchen as a cook and dishwasher. But here's the difference in him and so many of us. He devoted every moment to being with God. Listen to what he said. Again, this is a long time ago, but that phrase is used over and over again in Christian literature today. Practicing the presence of Jesus. He says, it's not necessary to have great things to do. I turn my little omelets in the pan for the love of God. In the kitchen, here's what he was called, the Lord of all pots and pans, was splattered with more than just grease and flour. Listen, he was covered in the dust of his rabbi. Isn't that crazy? Now listen, after he died in the 16th century, a bunch of his friends had learned so much from him that they wrote a book called Practicing the Presence of God. And it's all these stories about how Brother Lawrence did this. Do you know by some records, that's the second best-selling book in the history of the world. Number one is what? The Bible. But what he taught people in the most mundane way is that everything you do can be in the presence of God. Here's how a spiritual giant Dallas Willard puts it. The first and most basic thing we can and must do is to keep God before our minds. This is the fundamental secret of caring for our souls. Our part is thus practicing the presence of God to direct and redirect our minds constantly to Him. So let me introduce you to a new phrase I don't think I've ever said before. Even more arrogant thing to do is to leave your house in the morning without Jesus. Not just to leave your house without praying, but leave your house without Jesus going with you everywhere you go. So how do we do this, guys? This is sort of a new concept for most of us. I know it is for me. But how do I walk with Him? Let me give you what I'm going to call just some steps to how you remain. How do you abide? How do you begin to practice this? I hope you're taking notes because I think you might want to go home and look at this and begin to practice. Number one, first of all, you just need to rethink. Look at the way you think. Where does your mind go in quiet moments? Where does your mind go when you wake up? What's the first place it goes? Where does your mind go when you lay down? Where does your mind go when you're waiting in line at the coffee shop? Or it seems like every day this week you're still in traffic on I-85. Where does your mind go? Does it go just to your wants and needs and fears and worries? Or does it go to Jesus? We did a challenge a few years ago. Think about what you think about. That's this first point. First of all, just evaluate your thoughts. Do they gravitate toward the things of the world, or do they gravitate toward Jesus, even in the most mundane moments? So first of all, rethink. Second of all, retrain. Both Scripture and neuroscience agrees that your mind can be rewired. That's what Paul talks about in Romans 12, verse 2, the renewing of your mind. The official name for it today is neuroplasticity. Can anybody say that with me? Neuroplasticity. Michael Champion not even giving it a shot. Neuroplasticity. What's it saying? Is your mind is plastic. Here's the great news, guys. You have the ability to retrain your mind. Now, you may have some ruts of where you normally go standing in line, where you normally go in that traffic, where you normally go where you wake up. But through discipline and through the power of the Spirit, you have the ability, with God's help, to retrain your mind. What would it look like if Jesus was with you every moment of the day? When you're changing a diaper, when you're clearing your inbox out, when you're cooking, when you're watching your news, while you're watching your team get beat bad last night. Y'all like that, didn't you? Can you picture for a moment that in every one of those moments, just think about watching the news. Instead of just getting depressed, how about as you watched it, you prayed about everything you saw? How about when you're stuck in traffic, you just start thinking about how awesome Jesus is, how he unstuck you from your sins. Through practice, we train our minds to rest in God in the middle of the chaos of life. Where does your mind rest? Let it rest in God. So here's the great idea, is that you are able to redirect your thoughts. Maybe you find your thoughts going in a really negative way, or you find your thoughts worrying. I love what Paul says in Philippians 4. Worry about nothing, pray about everything. You've got the ability right in that moment to begin to retrain your mind. And so here's what happens is you begin to make a habit of thinking about Jesus in every situation. If Brother Lawrence can do it washing pots and pans, you and I can do it in all of our situations. And that leads us to the next point, it becomes a reflex. Eventually, it becomes normal. Something happens, and I just immediately, without a lot of work, just first thing, go to God. Spiritual reflex, see it's like, playing ball or playing the piano. You go to practice and you practice and you practice and practice. So there comes a day when you go out on the field and you don't have to think. You just normally reflect in the way that you have practiced over and over again. When you go to that piano recital, you don't have to think so much about it, but it's just a natural reflex. You have practiced long enough that you finally get to a point where it is natural. That's our goal, brothers and sisters, is that we practice redirecting our minds to Jesus in every area of our life to the point where finally it's just natural. And this is even cooler. Not only do we begin to have that reflex, we begin to reflect Jesus. My life and my responses become like Jesus. You ever hung out with somebody long enough that you started, responding like they did? Think about watching Alabama football years ago with Michael Summers, man. And that dude would just scream at the TV. Can you believe that? I was like, what in the world is this? And then about 2 months later, I screamed at the TV too. You just naturally become like the people you hang out with. That's just the principle here, guys. And here's the great part of that principle, is the more you hang out with Jesus, the more naturally you begin to react like Jesus. Listen to 2 Corinthians 3:18. So all of us who've had that veil removed can see and reflect the Lord, the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like Him as we are changed into His glorious image. The more I'm with Jesus, that's what this verse is saying, is it's not fast, it doesn't happen overnight, but slowly but surely you become more like Him. I was reading a book this week where they gave an example of this. Let's say you want to be more loving. You come to church and you say, I want to become a more loving person. And here's what you do. You meditate constantly on Jesus' love. You read passages about how much He loves you. And I love what this man said. He said, the more I do that, the more loving I become toward other people. You could walk out these doors today and say, hey, I'm making it my goal. I'm going to go love a whole lot better. And just by willpower, try to do it. And you probably won't do it because you'll go back to your natural reflexes. But if I've retrained my mind, if I've spent time with Jesus, and I understand how much He loves me, and I accept that, I can love other people. In fact, He gave an illustration that, first of all, I thought, man, I'm going to disagree with this. But the more I thought it was great. He said, why don't you learn to practice sitting in your sin with Jesus? Now, he's not saying you don't act like you sinned. He's not saying you don't acknowledge your guilt. But he's saying, once you've repented of it, how about if you just sat in the presence of Jesus with your sin and visualize Jesus loving you? That's powerful. I did that this week. Really blew it one day. Next day, my time with God, I just said, Lord, I'm going to try. I'm just going to sit in this sin. But instead of sitting in this sin with guilt, I sit in this sin knowing that Jesus still loves me. So that's what we're talking about in practicing the presence of Jesus. So this week, I want to challenge you. I would like to be covered in the dust of my Rabbi Jesus. How about this week? You walk out this door saying, I've been following Jesus so closely. His dust is going to just be all over me. I know He wants to be with me every moment. Wow, what a beautiful thing. And that's what our lesson's saying today. It is not just possible. It is what God wants for your life. It's not just for Jesus to be segmented in your life. Well, I come to church on Sunday and I give an hour and 15 minutes, or maybe I give Him 2 hours and 15 minutes. I go to Bible class. I mean, it's not just segmenting my time. It is not just I got this great time in the morning. It's, oh my goodness, my Jesus is with me every moment of the day. Wouldn't that be awesome? That's what's so important, what we're doing to our children. And our children's ministry does a beautiful job of training our children to focus on Jesus. But my friends, as parents, that's not enough. You got to be a part of that. So let me ask you, I think, a very practical question as we close out today for you to think about. How distracted are you? Because remember the basic principle today. To be like Jesus, you must be with Jesus. But Satan knows all he's got to do is distract me from Jesus. Again, like we said at the beginning, he doesn't necessarily have me to buy into some terrible, dark, rebellious sin. He just keeps my life so busy, so distracted. Because I think this is the problem in the age we live in. I mean, can you imagine, in Jesus' day, it was tough enough. In Brother Lawrence's day. But today, with all the media and cell phones and so much going on, and there's always somewhere you can go and something you can do, because I think this is one of Satan's greatest ploys. You sit here today, and you've not rejected Jesus. You've not shook your fist at Him and said, I just don't want to spend time with you. You've just been so distracted by other things that you've lost focus on Jesus. So I ask you, as you look back on your last week, have you been distracted or have you been focused? I'm not asking if you've done perfectly. None of us do. But how much have you about Jesus? Have you dwelt in Him? Have you made your home in Him? Or have you abided in Him? Because I'm not saying that at this moment to put you on any kind of guilt trip, as much as I'm trying to say, let's wake up, guys. We're claiming to want to be disciples, followers of Jesus. We can't do it unless we learn to retrain our thoughts onto Him. And so right now we're about to have what we call a time of invitation. Honestly, this is a time where you can recommit your life to Jesus. Maybe when I'm asking that question, you're saying, oh my goodness, buddy, this is a tough one. My life is so distracted right now that what you're, let me ask, is what I'm talking about almost sound foreign? And again, what happens on this front row, in my estimation, is a moment where you say, I need the prayers of the whole church to get my focus back on Jesus. Like the song we're about to sing, to abide, to live, to make my home in Jesus. Not just come to church, not just have a nice quiet time. Those are cool. Those are great. But to live with him. Guys, here's what's so crazy good about this. He actually wants to spend time with you all day, every day. If you need the prayers of the church today, why don't you come right now while we stand and sing?